These 5 neighborhoods were once home to some of the wealthiest families in America, lined with mansions that rivaled anything in Europe. Today, most of those mansions are gone or standing empty. Here's what happened to each one. Neighborhood number 1, Euclid Avenue, Cleveland, Ohio. In the late 1800s, Euclid Avenue was one of the most famous streets in the entire country, often compared to the grandest boulevards in Europe. It earned the nickname Millionaire's Row, lined with enormous mansions belonging to some of the wealthiest industrialists in America, including men who made their fortunes in oil, steel, and shipping during Cleveland's rise as a major industrial city. The scale of wealth here was genuinely extraordinary for the time. Some of the mansions on the street were among the largest private residences in the country, built with imported materials and staffed by dozens of servants. Visitors from around the world came specifically to see the street, and it was considered a symbol of American industrial success at its absolute peak. The decline began as Cleveland's economy shifted, and wealthy families started moving to newer suburban areas outside the city, following a pattern that played out in many American cities during the early 20th century. As commercial development spread along the avenue and the original residents passed away or relocated, many of the grand homes were sold, converted into offices, or simply demolished to make way for new construction. Very few of the original mansions survive today.
Most of what once made Euclid Avenue famous has been replaced by commercial buildings, parking lots, and modern development, leaving only scattered traces and old photographs to show what the street once looked like at the height of its wealth. Neighborhood number 2, Prairie Avenue, Chicago, Illinois.
Prairie Avenue on Chicago's South Side became the address of choice for the city's wealthiest families in the decades following the Great Chicago Fire, as the city rebuilt itself into a major industrial and commercial power. Meatpacking fortunes, retail fortunes, and manufacturing wealth all found their way onto this street, with families building large, architecturally significant mansions designed by some of the most respected architects of the era. For a period, Prairie Avenue was considered the most prestigious residential address in the entire city, home to business leaders whose companies shaped Chicago's economy for generations. The decline here came from a combination of industrial expansion and shifting social patterns. As railroads and factories expanded into the surrounding area, the neighborhood became less desirable for residential living, and many wealthy families began relocating to newer, quieter areas further from the increasingly industrial South Side. Once a critical mass of families left, the neighborhood's status as a prestigious address collapsed relatively quickly. Over the following decades, many of the original mansions were demolished, damaged by neglect, or lost to fire, leaving only a small handful of the original homes standing today. The surviving structures are now protected as a historic district, offering a narrow glimpse into a neighborhood that was once considered the pinnacle of Chicago wealth. Neighborhood number 3, Brush Park, Detroit, Michigan. Brush Park was once one of the wealthiest residential neighborhoods in Detroit, built during the city's rise as a major manufacturing center in the late 1800s, well before the automobile industry that Detroit would later become famous for. Lumber barons, shipping magnates, and early industrialists built large Victorian mansions throughout the neighborhood, creating a dense concentration of architecturally elaborate homes that reflected the tremendous wealth flowing through the city at the time.
At its peak, Brush Park was considered one of the most desirable addresses in the entire Midwest. Detroit's broader economic decline in the second half of the 20th century hit Brush Park especially hard.
As the city's population and industrial base shrank dramatically over several decades, the neighborhood saw an extreme wave of abandonment, with many of the original mansions left completely empty, stripped of valuable materials, and in some cases destroyed by fire or demolished due to safety concerns. For decades, Brush Park became one of the most striking examples of urban decay in the entire country, with grand, ornate mansions staying gutted and roofless right next to empty lots where other homes once stood. In recent years, redevelopment efforts have brought new construction and restoration to parts of the neighborhood, but many of the original millionaire-era homes are gone for good, and only a handful of the surviving mansions have been fully restored.
Neighborhood number 4, Vanderventer Place, St. Louis, Missouri. Vanderventer Place was once considered the most exclusive private street in St. Louis, home to an extraordinary concentration of the city's wealthiest families during the late 1800s and early 1900s. The neighborhood was designed as a private, gated residential enclave, with strict rules controlling what could be built and who could live there, similar in concept to some of the exclusive private streets found in other major American cities during that era. Fortunes built on brewing, manufacturing, and finance filled the street with elaborate mansions, and for a period, an address on Vanderventer Place was considered one of the strongest signals of wealth and social status in the entire city.
The decline here was unusually sharp and complete. As St. Louis's wealthy population shifted toward newer suburban developments during the early 20th century, Vanderventer Place lost its exclusive status relatively quickly. Unlike some neighborhoods that slowly faded over decades, much of Vanderventer Place was eventually demolished entirely, with the private street itself removed and the land redeveloped for entirely different purposes. Today, almost nothing remains of the original neighborhood. It stands as one of the more extreme examples on this list, a neighborhood so completely erased that most current St. Louis residents have never heard of it, despite it once being the wealthiest address in the entire city. Neighborhood number 5, Delaware Avenue, Buffalo, New York. Delaware Avenue in Buffalo earned its own version of the Millionaire's Row nickname during the late 1800s, when Buffalo was one of the largest and wealthiest cities in the entire country, fueled by its position as a major shipping and grain trading hub on the Great Lakes. Grain fortunes, shipping fortunes, and early industrial wealth built an extraordinary concentration of large mansions along this avenue, some designed by nationally recognized architects. At its peak, Buffalo's wealth per capita rivaled some of the largest cities in the country, and Delaware Avenue was considered the clearest physical representation of that wealth. As Buffalo's economic importance declined through the 20th century, following broader shifts in shipping routes and industrial patterns across the Great Lakes region, many wealthy families left the city entirely, and the avenue's mansions gradually lost the residents who had built and maintained them. A significant number of these grand homes were converted into offices, funeral homes, or institutional buildings, while others fell into disrepair or were demolished entirely. A portion of Delaware Avenue survives today as a protected historic district, with some of the original mansions restored and repurposed. But it represents only a fraction of what once stood, a reduced reminder of a much larger concentration of wealth that has largely disappeared from the city. 5 neighborhoods, 5 different cities, but the same underlying story. Enormous wealth built entire streets almost overnight, and once that wealth moved elsewhere, so did almost everything that made these neighborhoods famous. If you found this interesting, subscribe for more breakdowns on wealth, real estate, and the places money built and then left behind. Let us know in the comments which of these 5 surprised you the most. See you in the next one.